Melanie Jolly is of New Coast Financial. She's a seasoned professional experience in managing budget functions during tough economic cycles. She has an extensive background in the development of long and short-term marketing plans, sales projections, and budget analysis. She's been active in the marine and yacht lending and a strong supporter of the FIBA since 2001. Melanie directing a national sales team of financial specialists. Melanie Jollies.
Good morning. Everybody still awake? That was a great presentation by Ash, and he got to speak about the sexy, emotional side of our business. And I'm going to bore you just a little bit because I'm going to deal with some of the more factual side of what's going on in banking and compliance issues. So as Cindy said, I recently made a change. I left Bank United. I rejoined the financial brokerage market with New Coast. But I do think that based on what I observed in the banking industry, it's trickling down to businesses, and we need to talk a little bit about what's going on in banking and compliance and how it affects this industry specifically. So I'm going to talk about KYC, know your customer. So what does that mean, know your customer? I mean, Ash talked a lot about knowing the customer and getting very intimately involved with them and knowing who they are. So, do you know your customer? Do you know what it actually means to know your customer from a banking and regulation and compliance standpoint? Why is this important today? And what does this have to do with the business of selling yachts? So, we all are excited about a yacht, we close on it, and the money's changing hands, and we're waiting for a wire to come in, and it doesn't come in, and it doesn't come in, and the phone calls start exchanging hands, and you hear this mysterious, well, OFAC's involved. What the hell's that? So, has the bank recently asked you to explain in detail wire transfers, deposits, and other that seemingly normal banking activities? So why has your bank gotten so difficult lately? Who is OFAC, and how do they fit into AML laws, anti-money laundering laws, and regulations? And what are some of the possible ramifications? So I've observed recently, since 2015, a tremendous change on the banking side of what does a bank have to do when they're dealing with customers. And now I see it impacting many of our customers' accounts. So for the past 5 years, U.S. banks have been very involved in creating substantial resources to comply with the provisions of the U.S. Patriot Act, which was from 2001, aiming at deterring money laundering. So this is becoming very pervasive, okay? And it has trickled down into real estate and specifically yacht lending, yacht brokering, yacht sales, because it is a very ideal way to hide money. So we're seeing some dramatic changes affecting our business. So as a yacht broker, you're in the business of what? Marketing and selling yachts and a lifestyle and making people happy. So you have many things that you are involved in the transaction of a sale. You negotiate the terms of the sale, the paperwork, the romance part of it, the involvement, keeping them on the hook, not letting the sale go bad, finessing the entire survey process, and making sure that everything happens. In addition, this is going to be coming. It is coming. You need to know who you're dealing with. These questions will come up. So what does KYC mean? Okay, it's from a banking perspective and from your perspective soon to be, it's knowing who is on the other side of the table. So what are some of the things that you can do to know them? So in a KYC process, we're going through the bank, meaning the other side of it, they're going to ask for, obviously, driver's license passports. They're going to run some same name checks. They're going to do a customer identification program where they'll compare the customer's name against known names in OFAC. Okay, so if something comes up as a match, then there's another layer that comes up, and that's the EDD part of it, which is the enhanced due diligence. This is where those wire holdups come in. So you may get a same name match, George Gonzalez, right? So we all know a few of them. So here comes the wire from George Gonzalez, who is a same name match for George Gonzalez in some mafia group in Nicaragua. And immediately the wire is snagged. So there goes your wire. The guy is waiting to take his boat. The wire is sitting there not being processed because there's a bunch of enhanced due diligence that's going on the banking side of it, and they're calling you and they're asking some additional questions. So the deal closes, the wire gets cleared, and all goes on, and the customer leaves his boat. So what is OFAC, and how do they get involved in all this? So the purpose of OFAC is they're kind of behind the scenes looking over your shoulder. You know, they're looking over into the individuals and entities, and they're protecting our government against known terrorist activity, illegal movements of money, and OFAC is the ultimate brakes. They have the ability to put the brakes on, and there's nothing that your banker can do about that until they go through the process of actually going through the checklist and gathering the information from you, and you're going, what is this all about? The deal's already closed. You know, I don't understand why this is happening. This is happening because the regulations have gotten more sophisticated, the software behind the scenes is more sophisticated, and OFAC regulations have gotten more stringent. So recently, a motor yacht that was being chartered, this is a real story, was being chartered, and the money was submitted to the client's account. So when the wire came in for the benefit of XYZ vessel, whatever the name of the boat was, the wire came in. Well, that name of that boat was an exact match to a company doing business in Cuba. So what happened? Well, you know, OFAC said, you know, we have money coming in from Cuba. No, you have a boat named the same name as a company that does business in Cuba. It had nothing to do with one another, but meanwhile, the wire was frozen. And so that can take a matter of hours or days. So as it happened over a weekend on a Friday. And so on a Monday morning, the client is calling saying, listen, we're looking for a pretty substantial wire. What happened to it? So behind the scenes, your banker's getting a notification that this wire is being held and that they're busy trying to clear the OFAC compliance sheet. So it's nothing that anybody did wrong. It's just the fact that the compliance piece is getting tougher and tougher, and that they're looking for more reasons and ways that they can stop the movement of illegal money. So not a bank decision, not your banker's fault, it's no one's fault, it just happens. And so the suggestion there is to have a really good relationship with your banker is really important these days, because if you're comfortable with them and they're comfortable with you, they're gonna pick up the phone and say, listen, the wire's being held because, and you can help me clear it this way. So, what's money laundering? Money laundering is the process that criminals use to disguise the illegal origin of money, and then they want to re-infiltrate it back into the system by making it legitimate. So, there's actually 3 steps to this process. The first step, let me bring this up here. Okay, so the first step is you've got the source of funds from whatever the illegal activity is, and then they try to place it into the system, and then the money comes, whether it's through a series of complex wires in and out of the country, or whether it's through conversion to different currency, it will then re-enter the system as legitimate money, and it has to get spent. So one of the ways that it can get spent very easily is the purchase of a large yacht, which is why our industry has come up on the radar, and it's come up on the radar big time. So, 3 different stages: the placement stage, the layering stage where it comes and goes in and out of the country, and then it gets integrated into the system maybe as a yacht, and maybe that yacht needs to get sold quickly so that the cash then gets recaptured and returned back into the system as clean money. There are 700,000 global wires a day. So you can imagine the job that the banks have in trying to monitor the movement of money on a daily basis, and why your one wire on your yacht may be delayed. Just an idea of the task force that are behind the monitoring of this, the list goes on, the State Department, the FBI, the IRS, the DEA, the International Money Fund, et cetera. I mean, it is quite complex. It's an increased worldwide task force, but we're not winning. We're losing right now. So what to look for? And I bring it up because, again, it has been infiltrating down into the real estate market, the yacht market, and other luxury markets. Does your buyer want to bring cash to the closing? Well, that's a good sign. We're really not equipped in this industry to be dealing with cash. Cash transactions of a single day of $10,000, whether it's a deposit or something else, must be reported. Is the purchase consistent with the buyer's previous boating experience, their residency, their occupation? You've got a guy who, I don't know, maybe he works in a kitchen somewhere and he wants to buy a $500,000 boat. I mean, consistent? Not consistent. Does the buyer want to flip the purchase immediately? Let's just get this deal done. Especially if he's not worried about the price that he's paying for it, whether it's above or below market, or what he wants to sell it for once he owns it. But it sounds good to you. I'm going to get 2 sales out of this. Unrealistic or unnecessary speed of the transaction. It's not really something that we think about because we want it to close quickly. We want to get paid. So we want the deal to happen quickly. But when it's unrealistic, it might be a flag for us to think about. Is there some unusual source of funding coming into the deal? Is there a third party, an unnamed third party? Are the funds coming from unrelated businesses? And you're thinking, it's not really my job to care. I want to sell a boat. But it is our job to care, and I'll get to that in a minute. Is there some geographic risk? Does the client want to keep the boat in Alaska, or does he live in Alaska and want to keep the boat in Mexico? Or, is there something unusual about the geographic relationship of the buyer versus the boat? Third-party individuals to obscure the identity. Who are we really dealing with? A buyer's representative, and not really getting an opportunity to know who the buyer is. Politically exposed people. When we know they like boats, I mean, the very, very wealthy love boats, but are they politically exposed, and why is that a concern? Is there money in their country and they're trying to get it out of their country? Transactional risk. Again, pay attention to whether the boat is over or undervalued. Is it selling for significantly more or less? Does the seller seem disinterested in obtaining a better price for the value? Well, here you got a guy who's really anxious to sell, and it's just get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. Why? So, by recent virtue of legislation, businesses and individuals legally involved in money laundering, or legally involved in money laundering, there are civil penalties. And so if you are knowingly or unknowingly involved in this, there are civil penalties that can be assessed. And that's why this is important. So you can read, I don't need to read that to you, but the sentencing fines are a minimum of $500,000, or twice the value of the property involved in the transaction, or 20 years, or both. Not to scare you, but this is the world we live in today. And since 2015, this has escalated. So the presence of a single risk factor or multiple factors doesn't mean your client's money laundering, but you need to think about it. You should be aware of this, because it's not something that we've been accustomed to thinking about, or that's just not how we do business. It's never been the way we did business. So what happens if you suspect something? Well, the first thing to do would be to report it to law enforcement of the FBI if you feel very strongly about that, or report it to your bank. Let your bank get involved. Let them be the one that does the due diligence on this. Okay, so here's a real scenario that happened as well. A customer was traveling from Colombia to Paris and declared in Paris legally 125,000 euros. The traveler opened up a bank account in Europe and deposited the funds. He then flew back to Colombia, went to the ATM over time, withdrew the funds from the ATM in his local currency, then flew back to Europe and deposited the money back into the European account. Well, why would you do that? I mean, but that's the layering, that's the movement of the money. The person was helping a large drug organization in Colombia change their proceeds paid in euro into local currency back in Colombia. And it's called trade-based money laundering. And ultimately, the money was used towards the purchase of a boat in Europe. And then the boat went to Mexico and was sold. So it happens. In summary, AML, anti-money laundering, is a risk that's carefully monitored by your bank. They have very sophisticated systems to catch this. They will notify you of their concerns. So you may think that it's normal and expected in a business transaction, but they're going to come back and they're going to say, what's the source of the wire? And you're going to say, I don't know, the customer just sent me a wire. What are the details on the customer? What's the purpose of the wire? Can we have a copy of the purchase agreement? This is all very much standard operating procedures, but it's trickling down into the industry, and we all need to be aware of it. It's for your own protection. So be aware of the KYC process. Be alert to the warning signs that we talked about: cash, unusual purchase pricing, flipping, third-party involvement, geographic factors, politically exposed people, and be responsive to your bank's request for information. That's it. Questions?
Suspect if you are thinking it's funny but you don't say anything or do anything, could you be subject?
Yes. So if you suspect something and you don't report it, could you be liable? The answer is yes. The answer is that if you see something, say something. You know, it goes back to that idiom. So honestly, yes, you could be. You know, it's new. It's happening. Banks are seeing a huge change in the last 2 years. I mean, I can speak from my experience in Bank United. In 3.5 years, in the last 6 months, I had more wires stopped than I can possibly count. Hence, I'm no longer a banker. Too challenging. Other questions? Good question. So what kind of searches can you do on your customer to kind of know a little bit who they are besides Google? So, I mean, obviously driver's license and passports to confirm identification. You know, in the whole process, we want to know who we're doing business with, and Google searches are important. And if it's a corporation, you know, digging down a little bit, it doesn't take long to pull up the corporation, and you have to have the corporation papers anyway to know who the responsible parties are and who the beneficial owners are. So those are all really good things. And then, you know, just good old conversation is really important, you know, talk to them. I mean, if they're saying that they're the CEO of some company and you're asking them questions about the company and they can't answer them, you know, you might think, well, gee, you know, is this guy really who he says he is? And what kinds of things can I do to find out? Who in the room's opened up a bank account lately? Anybody try to open a bank account lately? I mean, the paperwork today just to open up a bank account so that the banks know who the beneficial owners of these accounts are. I mean, it is a process that is just crazy, but it's what we're dealing with today.
Yes, thanks, Bob. Melanie, let's say we've done our due diligence, we know who our client is, we're confident in that. Who at the bank do we need to communicate to make sure that they have that information so there isn't a misstep and a wire is unnecessarily held up?
Great question. So when you're submitting, when the wires are going in, the more information that you can put on that document, the better, for the benefit of the name of the boat, the contract number, things like that. But I will tell you that they will contact you. If you've got a good banking relationship and something happens with that wire, your banker's going to be on the phone with you saying, listen, you know, the wire's being held up. They may tell you that it's OFAC, they may just tell you it's being held up, and they're going to ask you for some additional information to help them clear it so that it can get processed. Thanks, Melanie. My pleasure. Thank you.